All right, picture this. It's 2006, Friday, 3 p.m. You're about to head out of work. Your IT department's all in on these Sun Microsystems Sunray thin clients. We got them on every desk, every shelf. We'll talk about whether that's a good thing or not later. You're rocking the Sunray 1 still. It's 7 years old. Your boss doesn't like you. But that's all right. You've got Star Office 8, the premier productivity suite for the modern office. You can slang spreadsheets just as good as those Windows XP losers. Maybe she's a little old, but it doesn't matter. You can hot desk, take your spreadsheets wherever you want. Maybe the break room fridge has a little something going on inside. Who knows? And your buddy down the hall has this sweet Sunray 270 with the 17-inch display built in. And you're sure as hell not typing in your password to log in. You've got these Java cards. Time to get these things doing some real work. It's not that good. It's just not that good. And it's really bad if you crank up the resolution to anything reasonable to play at. Ooh. All right, so you might not be getting a whole lot of gaming done on these things. That was Quake 2. Here's what Quake 3 looked like. To be fair, I'm pretty sure with 500 more hours of my time, we could get various versions of Quake running a little better on these things. The operating system has OpenGL, the server has a video card, some of these even have video hardware, but that's not quite what we're after here. Today we're going to explore this Sunray 1 from 1999, as well as this Sunray 270 from 2006. We'll take a look at their physical characteristics, their hardware specs, but more specifically, we're going to dive into what it's actually like to use these things. And what are these things exactly? So these are thin clients, specifically the Sun Microsystems Sunray line of thin clients. Generally speaking, a thin client is a device which doesn't have a hard drive, doesn't have an OS, at least in the traditional sense for us to do anything productive with, requires a network, and requires a server. In a previous video, we got the server component, the network component working for these things. You don't necessarily have to watch that one to enjoy this one. I'll give you the quick rundown. We got a fresh install of Sun's Unix operating system, Solaris 10 to be exact, on this V240. This machine has 2 gigs of DDR2 RAM and a single UltraSpark 3i. Then we moved on to getting the Sunray server software installed so that we could start using these things. So we'll kick things off having a look at this Sunray 1, then we'll move on to the Sunray 270. Let's get into it. So this Sunray 1 came to me by way of the folks over at the Serial Port. Originally, it was on loan, and they just told me I could keep it, which left me speechless, or near speechless, not speechless enough to immediately accept it. So thanks again to the Serial Port. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If you haven't checked out their channel, go do it now. Tons of great stuff over there. So this is the Sunray that started it all. It came out in 1999. We'll have a look around here. First thing to note is this is metal. So I'll probably draw a lot of comparisons to these Sunray 2s from 2006, simply because it's what I've used the most in my 3 or so months of Sunray deployment and administration experience. These are super chintzy, like this plastic feels like it's made out of rice. This is relatively beefy so that it can stand up properly, of course. This thing, on the other hand, weighs easily as much as the stand for this one. And again, metal, this part's plastic. And on the back here, we've got the IEEE connector 10100 NIC, 4 USB ports, a VGA port, a composite in, and then audio line in and out. On the front, got a headphone jack, microphone jack, and of course our smart card port. As a quick comparison, this one takes a barrel jack, so that was some cost savings. It has a total of 2 USB ports, one on the front, one on the back, a 10100 Ethernet jack, and a DVI display out, along with a serial port here. So yeah, it's clear for this first model, Sun took we'll say less cost-cutting measures, given that it has the built-in power supply, which, to be fair, does get quite warm. I don't have a way to measure this, and I've heard they're prone to failure. You have to get in here and recap them. This one's working just fine, though. And I'm also sure you've noticed there's no way to let this thing set on its own. That's because originally this came with a purple stand for it to sit in like so. And it is very common for those to be missing. If you go look on eBay, it's very hard to find one. Well, it's hard to find one of these in the first place, and it's definitely hard to find one with the stand. So in the meantime, we'll of course use the next best thing, a GameCube. If you're watching this, Nick, I'm putting your GameCube to good use. The Sunray 1 was released in 1999, but it wasn't Sun's first foray into thin clients. The Sunray was essentially a successor to Sun's Java Station network computers. Network computers, or NCs, adhered to a specification put forward by none other than Oracle, who would eventually go on to acquire Sun Microsystems and ultimately end of life the Sunray line. According to an article on CRN.com from the time, the Sunray 1 would have cost you $499 US in 1999, or roughly $928 US in 2023 adjusted for inflation. The Sunray 1 has 8 megabytes of RAM and a 100 MHz MicroSpark-2 EP processor. The Spark processor meant for low-end and embedded workstations. The spec page on Sun.com at the time not only has a very cool pixel art-esque rendition of the Sunray, but also mentions optional Sun microphone and Sun camera add-ons, which I'm sure are impossible to come by. So before we dive in here, I just wanted to reflect on the fact that these Sunrays and any thin client Sun produced really is the manifestation of Sun's whole ethos. So since the mid-80s, their slogan had been, "The network is the computer." And what are these things if not that? They are not computers without the network. They can't do anything useful. They can't even show you this screen without being on the network and connecting to a server. So I think it's we'll find out as we dive in whether these things are good or not, especially by today's standards. But you can really see why a company like Sun was pursuing this. Sun had been obsessed with computer networking since the beginning. So Bill Joy, one of the co-founders of Sun, actually implemented the first TCP IP stack in Berkeley Unix way back in the mid-80s. In fact, there's a great quote about Sun in this book I just finished, Where Wizards Stay Up Late, The Origins of the Internet by Katie Hafner and Matthew Lyon. And they're discussing Bill Joy, the Sun co-founder, implementing TCP IP in Berkeley Unix, and state, "When Sun included network software as part of every machine it sold and didn't charge separately for it, networking exploded." The Sunray 1, where it all started, well, at least for these Sunray line of clients. Sorry about the weird wide monitor. I can't get it to work with my older Dell monitors for some reason. It's the only monitor I have where it looks reasonable at all. So let's dive in. All right, we're running a version of Solaris 10 from 2009, and the first time you log in, you're presented with some options. You've got the Java desktop system or the common desktop environment, also known as CDE. I thought it'd be interesting to show you guys the CDE environment. And at this point, CDE was on its way out. So you can see it's complaining that CDE has been deprecated and will be removed in a future release. So CDE was a proprietary Unix desktop environment. Sun had a version, HP had a version, IBM, etc. And here's what you get when you first log in. Something that would have been really novel to Windows users at the time was the multiple desktops. So you can see we've got 4 workspaces by default, and they've all got their own different background, which is kind of cool. And when you first start up, you kind of get this default view. It's got this very kind of Windows 3.1-esque menuing system with the minus symbol over here to close windows. And so this would have been a pretty typical Unix workstation experience with CDE and all throughout the 90s at the very least. And so it's got this kind of menuing system, and they persist, which is kind of interesting. So they'll stick around until you close them up. Something interesting we can take a look at is the Solaris Management Console. The look and feel of these Solaris apps inside CDE, I don't know, just feels more cohesive, feels right, I guess I'll say, compared to the Java desktop system. We'll go look at that in a second. All right, finally loaded. Let's just poke around here. We've got system status. We can take a look at performance. My password is collab, don't tell anyone. So you can, all sorts of information about the server itself. Kind of cool. There's collab up in the corner, that's me. Let's fire up the browser on this thing. Check out what this thing is. Look at that. Mozilla 1.7. Not Firefox, Mozilla, the good old days. And it looks like the newest date I can see on here is 2003. So this thing's at least 20 years old. And we need to give credit where credit is due. We're going to hit a lot of these server certificate issues, which is fine. You can see Google still loads up. Let's search for Sunray Sun Microsystems. Yeah, Google just works. It's really incredible. This is a very old browser. And then, of course, we have to go to theoldnet.com. Let's go check out sun.com in 1999. One moment. Got our alt text coming in here. Ooh, logo showing up. And there you go. This is exactly what the experience would have been like in 1999 when you pulled your Sunray out of the box and went to sun.com. This browser's a little newer. To be fair, I guess it's 4 years newer. But CDE would have looked like this. The whole experience would have been pretty similar to this. So let's log out and have a look at the Java desktop system. All right, so if we had chosen Java desktop system, the default, this is what we'd get. That nice Solaris Web 2.0 look. And here we are. So this is called Java Desktop System. It's not in Java. It's GNOME or Genome or whatever, skinned the way Sun wanted it. And the first thing we're going to do is take a look at this desktop background. We got to get one of these Java looking one. Oh yeah, that's definitely what we're going with. All right, so let's fire up the browser here. I just love seeing the Mozilla web browser. I haven't used it forever. So obviously it's the same thing. All of this is on the server. I guess it probably goes without saying, but it's maybe worth reiterating. This is the exact same application. We're just in a different UI view of it. And let's fire up Firefox. Here we are. Let's see what version we've got. 2.0 from 2008. So cool to see. Uh-oh. This thing's having a little trouble. Yeah, so the Sunray just rebooted itself for some reason. More on that later. But this is a perfect example. So that thing just power cycled itself. Something's wrong. And it kept our session because it's on the server. So that's what would have happened if you had, I don't know, pulled the power plug out of that thing. Kind of a cool feature of these thin clients. All right, so using these existing browsers here is pretty much going to be impossible. Like, they're just so out of date. So what I've done is I hunted down the last version of Firefox that I could find for Solaris, Firefox Pt2, and let's try to launch it on this thing. Oh no. Add-on compatibility updates, don't do that. It's pretty slow. It took about 20 seconds. I cut some stuff out there. Oh, come on, buddy. Okay, we're doing okay. Let's try going to my website again. Better, okay. This thing's online. All right, one last thing. Let's sign the Rack Cobalt guest book. There we go. Signing a guest book on a Sunray one from 1999, hosted on a Cobalt rack. I'd wanted to get a lot more footage of what it's like to actually use this Sunray one, but she's getting a little tired. So you saw just now it rebooted itself for some reason, and typically what's been happening is after about 15 or 20 minutes of use, whether you're logged out or logged in, it does a reboot and then hangs at a loading screen. And it has to be power cycled, and usually you have to wait like at least 30 seconds before you give it power again for it to fully boot up properly. So it's over 20 years old, and you have to remember these things don't have power switches. They were intended to be on at all times. So you would have had this at your workstation, left for the day, and this thing's just sitting there in some sort of idle mode. So after 20 plus years, this thing probably just has an incredible amount of hours on it. So in the interest of keeping it working, we're going to take it easy on this one. And let's start having a look at this Sunray 270. So our first obstacle to overcome with this thing is that it's been configured to connect to a VPN at sun.com, which implies to me this was actually used by Sun Microsystems, which is awesome, but I want to use it now. So theoretically, if we power cycle it, and on a Windows keyboard, which is all I have, you hold Control, Pause, C, we should get into a menu that'll let us reset this. I'm skeptical, but we will give it a shot. So power off, Control, Pause, C. Okay, what do you know? It worked. So here we're in a service menu, and I think we just do clear configuration. I would like to do that. It's rebooting. And I'm hoping we see it give up its VPN attempt. It's got an IP. That's looking good. Oh, that was so easy. All right. Look at that. Resolution's a little weird, but we can figure that out. This is a session. Oh, it fixed itself. Yeah, all right. The Sunray 270 came out in 2006, and it's got this built-in 17-inch TFT LCD display, obviously, which I think makes it really cool in terms of all these Sunray thin clients. It's got a max resolution of 1280 by 1024, and on that note, let's take a look at that. Just wanted to show that the server software actually supports like tons of different resolutions. Like, look at this. And if you happen to use one that's too big, it handles it pretty nicely. So let's go to 1920 by 1080. We'll keep it. And you can kind of just move around so you're never stuck. I think that's a pretty good behavior. And unfortunately, I cannot find a price. I can't find out what this costs when it came out in 2006. Usually I just hit the Sun website or find an article, but Sun had some sort of interactive pricing builder at the time, which of course doesn't work now. So if you know how much these cost or have a news article you could link me to, I'd be really curious, because I think they're going to be more than that Sunray 1. On the front here, it's got a microphone, headphone, and line in, a USB port. Of course, we've got our smart card reader, and then a very nice set of buttons for the on-screen display menu, which is actually quite robust. Around back here, another nice Sun logo. Love that attention to detail. They've got the main board and all the componentry right on the back of the monitor, obviously. It's got 16 megs of RAM and a 500 megahertz AMD Alchemy AU1550. Turning to one side, 2 serial ports. And on the other side, we've got 3 additional USB ports. We've got a VGA out for a projector. So I think you could power a projector with this. We've got a VGA in and a 10100 NIC and a wall wart power connector. Speaking of, this thing wants 12 volts at 5 amps, and it wants all 5 amps. So I had been using these 12 volt 2 amp adapters right when I got it just to test it out, and within minutes it overheats these and they turn off. So I had to get an actual 5 amp 12 volt. I mean, that's not very nice. And in fact, it's quite warm as well. So yeah, she's pretty power hungry. All right, to kick us off, a quick note about using the terminal on Solaris 10. So let's open one up. By default, it uses the C shell, also created by Bill Joy in the 1970s. And if you're used to Bash or any other Linux, modern shell, it's pretty painful. So let's just do, echo hello YouTube, run that. So typically, if you would want to run this command again in a shell you're using, you'd press the up arrow on your keyboard. Not in C shell. It just prints garbage to the terminal. Maybe, do I need a Sun keyboard for this? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. And then it doesn't have a history command to see the commands you've looked at. Control R doesn't work for recursive backward search. And I'm embarrassed to say it took me a long time to realize I should just hop over to Bash, which comes with Solaris 10. So of course now I can run my command. I can press up, run it again. I can type history. So anyway, if you're used to these other shells, definitely do that first. So to kick us off, we got to launch Star Office 8. I'm not going to put any cuts in here so that you guys can get a feel for how long things take, even if some of it might be a little painful. My anecdote about Star Office is, you know, back in when I was in college, 2006 or 2007, I got obsessed with open source everything. I put Ubuntu 6 on my laptop. I was only using OpenOffice to try to do all my coursework to varying degrees of success. Anyway, that only lasted a couple years. OpenOffice is related to StarOffice. StarOffice is kind of Sun's version of it. And of course, this is a competitor to the Microsoft Office suite of tools. So let's fire up presentation. From template. Let's choose one of these at random. Ooh, yeah, that's looking good. So you can see it, you know, some paint time, but it's really not too bad. I'm trying to remember, you know, computers at the time were they were slower. And so I think this is pretty reasonable, I think, to use. Check that out. All right, so that's Star Office. Let's poke around at some other applications here. This all is just what came with Solaris 10. I didn't really do anything other than Quake. And I don't know, let's go look at games. So you've got the typical, you know, open source set of stuff here. Spider Solitaire. The biggest lag is waiting for an application to actually launch. It's not so bad once you're in there, but you can see, yeah, there's that lag when these things start up, which is kind of frustrating. Another interesting thing is that without me doing anything, it recognizes my Windows machines. You know, they're shared folders, which is pretty cool. One more thing I got to show you. Real Player 10. Look at that. When is the last time you saw that logo? All right, it's also got this pretty abysmal looking performance meter, CPU, overall load, disk usage, network packets. Let's have this open while we fire up Quake 2 just to see what the server's up to when that's happening. That's a speaker inside this thing, by the way. That was a huge surprise. I had no idea. Okay, so we are CPU bound, which no surprise, this is doing software rendering. So yeah, we're absolutely pegging the CPU. I only have one in there, so it could be interesting to, well, try to get this thing, you know, doing software rendering. I'll show you here in a second. So software, I can turn it on to OpenGL, and it doesn't really help. See if it'll make a difference here. I mean, it gets unusable. Like, the lag on the menu input is just horrendous. And of course, we're still absolutely pounding the CPU. So yeah, maybe in a future video, we'll try to optimize this. I'll pick up another CPU, get dual CPUs going. I don't even know if this thing could take advantage of that, but it could be interesting. So I might complain about clunkiness or slowness of applications on these things, but it's an absolute testament to Sun's dedication to their ecosystem that I can run an OS version from 2009 on one of their servers from 2006, and this 24-year-old appliance can connect to them just fine here in 2023. Clearly, it's been upgraded to some sort of Oracle version of the firmware in 2009 and up or whatever. Also impressive in and of itself. It's hard sort of to articulate because it's more of a feeling dealing with this Sun stuff over the past few months. It's almost like what Apple or Macintosh's, you know, walled garden should feel like. Apple is constantly deprecating hardware and software and making life so painful. Whereas Sun was clearly doing the opposite, trying to make sure things they had produced in the past worked going forward for literally decades. I mean, we're talking about a span of a decade between the OS version, the time this thing came out, and the year the server came out. Truly impressive in terms of what Sun was thinking about when they were building this software. All the doubters were doubting me when I just wouldn't stop buying monitors, but look at me now. Maybe one of the more impressive Sunray installations of 2023. But yeah, there we go. So I'd also wanted to surprise you with the Sunray 2FS. You can see it's quite a bit bigger than the Sunray 2. It's pretty interesting because it has dual monitor support. But bad eBay shipping strikes again. This poor thing was not packaged properly, and this very heavy base that it comes with absolutely destroyed it during shipping. I'm sure it still works, but I need to talk with the eBay seller to sort this out first, unfortunately. And it's sort of unfortunate, at least according to this sticker, it was some sort of prototype, early version, if that sticker's to be trusted anyway. So yeah, we'll see this guy later. Well, final thoughts on actually using these things in your day-to-day work. Were they good enough in the era in which they were made for things like spreadsheet work, email, and I'll call it general office work of the mid-2000s? Yeah, I would say they were. Would I want one necessarily? No, I think I'll always prefer to have my own PC or my own Mac, but that's just me. I also don't know what it's like to administer these things at scale. I only have 4 of them. It works fine, but I don't know what it's like to have 30,000 of these things and you've got clusters of the servers running. Not sure. If you had experience with that, leave comments down below. I'd love to hear about it. I imagine there are difficulties, as with anything at scale, right? But generally speaking, these things are so interesting and cool. So yeah, would I have wanted one? Probably not. Are they awesome? Yeah, absolutely. These things are super cool. And thin clients are still around to this day. This is just one failed line of them from our past. So I hope I used them enough on camera here to give you an idea and a feel for what it's like. Some of the bottleneck and speed might be the server I'm running. Maybe we need more horsepower there and these would be a better experience, quite possibly. As a reminder, this is a series of videos I'm doing on these Sunrays. This is part 2, what it's like to use them. In the 3rd video, we're going to install this Sun PCI 3 card in the server. This is going to let us install Windows on this card, and theoretically, we might be able to get these connecting to the Windows instance on the Sunfire. But at the very least, we'll see what it's like to connect these things up to a Windows server. That's a totally and legitimate feature that Sun offered for these right out of the box. So that should be pretty interesting. Not sure if that's going to be my next video, but it's definitely a video that's coming. I hope you found this interesting, and in the meantime, I'll see you in the next one.